All right, welcome in. We're an hour to go until the trade deadline in the NFL. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by Pete Prisco and Brady Quinn. Actually, it's more like 55 minutes to go. Do we see anything of note happening, Pete, you think?
I don't see nothing happening. I mean, we've seen some happen. We saw Von Miller get traded.
Yesterday, yeah.
You know, Melvin Ingram, that's not a big deal. He wasn't even playing for the Steelers and isn't close to being the same player. That's a desperation move by the Chiefs. But, you know, I thought maybe Evan Ingram, maybe for a fifth-round pick, sixth-round pick, something along those lines for a team that needs a tight end.
You would have thought maybe a guy like Allen Robinson, too, who, you know, wanted to be somewhere where maybe they can better utilize him. That hasn't worked out so well in Chicago at this point. Or maybe some other receivers, right? Brandon Cooks, you could throw him into the mix. But that's the
any Texan, right?
Well, depending on, so that's the interesting thing, though, is how these teams view their situation. Because, like, take, for example, the New York Giants. Like, people kind of talked about, well, they just lost to Kansas City. So now do you start getting rid of some of the players in order to try to rebuild? Well, David Gettleman can't do that because he's the guy who brought these guys in there. So he's basically, like, you know, starting to dig his own grave if he goes that route to try to say they're rebuilding.
His grave is being dug.
Well, and that might be the case. And then Joe Judge doesn't want that either because he's feeling the pressure. So you start to look at some of these other organizations right now in regards to their general manager, their head coach, and really how they're feeling, what the hot seat is. Some of them might not want to say, hey, we're in rebuild mode because they're not going to be able to see it on the other side. They might start making these trades, and all of a sudden in the offseason, it might be someone else who's utilizing those draft picks they're acquiring.
Yeah, for example, if Ryan Pace trades Allen Robinson, is he going to be there to use the draft picks? Probably not.
Right.
So
that's what I'm thinking. I mean, why would they want to make that trade if they've got to win now to save their job?
I think the other thought is, at least, and maybe this is more of the case, and outside of what's the legal situation with Deshaun Watson is, you know, are you able to get your best offer for him? And at this point in time in the season? Or are you better off where you get to the offseason, maybe the legal situation has cleared itself up, or there's just more clarity at that point, and then you can create a market? Because all we know as of right now is that Deshaun Watson was only willing to be traded to the Miami Dolphins. Well, if that's the case, the Houston Texans were never going to get what they wanted for his services because the Dolphins are the only team bidding on him. They're the only team that was willing to potentially make that or take that risk, and they decided not to do so. So in the offseason, once there's more clarity, maybe you get other teams in the mix, or maybe you get Deshaun Watson who says, I'm willing to go somewhere else outside of Miami to get this done.
Real quick, two things. It's amazing in the NFL that a guy who has so many legal things hanging over his head right now can dictate terms. Think about that for a second. Just step back from it from an NFL standpoint and think about that. And one more thing. I do hear the Jaguars would love to trade Urban Meyer, but I don't think there's a market for him.
I heard you were on the trading block.
Maybe.
That's what Brinson said. Brinson said on the podcast that you were on the trading block here at CBS.
Well, he's on the cutting block, so that's a big difference.
We're going to be here with you until the trade deadline at the top of the hour, 4 o'clock, and through the deadline in case anything happens. But let's bring in one of our insiders, Jonathan Jones. JJ, why was a trade not able to be made by the Dolphins and Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I think Brady hit on a couple of points. It was really always going to be Miami or bust for Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. Here's the thing. The Carolina Panthers, for example, were always interested in Deshaun Watson. They've been interested in him dating back to January. They were interested in him in February, even when the rumors first, and then the lawsuits, and then the allegations, and then the criminal complaints happened. There was still interest within the Carolina Panthers building, within the Philadelphia Eagles building, some interest with the Denver Broncos, and certainly with the Miami Dolphins in Deshaun Watson. However, Deshaun Watson and his representation never waived the no-trade clause for any team other than the Miami Dolphins. From what I have been told, there was talk with the Carolina Panthers and other teams. Okay, you're in it, you're in it, you're in it. But there was never that notification sent to the Houston Texans of, we waive our no-trade clause for this team, other than, of course, the Miami Dolphins. That severely limited a certain team's ability to further investigate and do, quote-unquote, due diligence into Deshaun Watson, potentially acquiring a fantastic young quarterback who is facing very, very serious legal issues. And so because of that, it was really just the Houston Texans and Miami Dolphins. Brady just touched on it. Well, when you sort of strip away that leverage, the Miami Dolphins can say, here's what we're going to offer you. And the Houston Texans want to stand firm on what they want for Deshaun Watson. They can, because the Houston Texans have decided we can sit and pay him and deal with the embarrassment of sitting him and paying him. That is the calculation that GM Nick Caserio, that head coach David Culley, and that most importantly, owner Cal McNair have decided upon. Now, Cal McNair does want and did want to trade Deshaun Watson, but he did empower his general manager, Nick Caserio, when he brought him on from the New England Patriots to be able to make football decisions. So he kept him in charge of those football decisions. But if Cal McNair had his druthers, I do believe that he would have dealt Deshaun Watson. And then the final point that I'll make is there is a report out there that Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, was only able to meet with Deshaun Watson very recently. That is a very curious and rather troubling report, considering that the no trade clause had been waived for the Miami Dolphins, that the Dolphins were extremely interested in Deshaun Watson, that Stephen Ross was extremely interested in Deshaun Watson. It's hard to imagine that Deshaun Watson and his camp were preventing Stephen Ross from linking up with Deshaun Watson, and so it would sit either with the Houston Texans or with the Miami Dolphins of waiting so long to allow this union to take place. So that's something that I look forward to diving into a little bit more with time. But as Brady mentioned, and it's true, this is a bit of a gamble for Nick Caserio, the GM of the Houston Texans. I think a lot of people, Chris, are looking at this and saying, all right, you know what, Deshaun Watson, when it gets to the new league year, maybe some of these cases are going to be resolved. There's going to be more clarity. Maybe not. And not only may there not be any clarity or conclusions reached, but actually the situation could worsen. And so that's a consideration I don't think many people are really factoring in here. But we may very well be in this same situation in March and then into April. And this could absolutely, as several league sources have indicated to me, drag out until the night of the 2022 NFL Draft.
Again, I'm going to go back to what I said. It's amazing that this NFL league is allowing itself to sit here and have a quarterback dictate terms when he has the legal process to go through. And we don't know how that's going to play out. Nobody does. I don't think he does. And yet, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to be traded to that team. I don't want to play for that team. And it's happening. It's amazing to me. And yeah, there's a risk that you won't get back if something happens to him. If legally he's, going to face some trials.
22 civil suits, 10 criminal.
And so if they turn into real criminal charges, then he's not going to play football, period. And so that's what I just don't understand. And I talked to a guy in the league, and he said, it's amazing to me that his agent has been allowed to do this and allowed to dictate terms. It's mystifying to me. And look, we don't know we don't know how it's going to play out. But as is right now, to sell that trade to your fan base, I think that's a tough sell.
It's a tough sell because you got to have an explanation, right? The owner is going to have to be the one that has to explain himself, and we don't know many owners that want to be in the public eye to do that and have to be accountable for that with everything that's out there. So to your point, I mean, common sense would tell you this was never going to happen because this is an unprecedented legal situation. All that being said, though, there are teams who get desperate and they want to try to find someone who's an unbelievable talent, and no one's going to question his talent, the fact that he's under contract for the foreseeable future. And so there are some pros as to why you'd want to try to make that move, because a guy like him almost never comes up for trade because you're going to keep him within your organization until he either gets to the point where he no longer is capable of playing that way, or there's something that ends up happening that causes him not to be able to play football anymore. This would fall into that category. That's the only way he even becomes able to be traded to go somewhere else.
I get it. He's a franchise quarterback, and there's great value in the franchise quarterback, but why not just wait? Let it play out.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday. I think one of the risks you have if you wait until the offseason, you get more clarity, hopefully, with the legal situation. But the other issue is then, what happens if Russell Wilson is then out there, or Aaron Rodgers, or both? He's fallen behind both those two. And so then maybe your market's not as good because you got two other guys who are going to be more desirable than your guy who's sit on your roster that doesn't want to be there anymore.
Well, that's the risk you got to take. I just think it's hard to trade for him with the current climate the way it is and those legal situations hanging over his head.
Well, nobody's trading for him before the deadline at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Deshaun Watson is going to remain a Houston Texan, though he will not play for the Houston Texans.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.